Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome, welcome. Hello, hello. So welcome to Performance Firestarters 17. This is our 17th Performance Firestarters. So by all means, grab a last minute drink and come and sit down. There's plenty of spaces. We've got some space over here. All right, so welcome to Performance Firestarters 17. We are covering attribution tonight, which is a subject actually that we've done before. We did this, I think, about 4 years ago now. And we kind of touched on it with some of the other Performance Firestarters that we've done. But we really wanted to come at this one again, square on, really, just in the context of last-click marketing attribution models still being around, still being dominating the way in which we understand attribution. We wanted to really ask about what can get us past that. So we've got 4 great speakers for you tonight. I need to do just a couple of pieces of housekeeping first of all before we kick off. So the toilets are either side by the lifts, so that way and that way. The fire escape, if the fire alarm, in the unlikely event that the fire alarm goes off, is also there as well. And there will be people stationed on the doors to get you back in, so you won't have any problems getting back in. All right, so for tonight's session, the hashtag is hashtag Firestarters, by the way. We have 4 brilliant speakers. We've got Andrew Wilshire, he's the founder of Diametrical. We have Katherine Munford, Managing Director of Data Decisions. Toby Michael, Group Business Director at Exelis, and Kevin Joyner, Director of Planning and Insight at Crowd. Now, we normally, actually, when we do the registration, we normally do a bit of a survey, actually, with Performance Firestarters to get your opinion. But actually, we're going to try something different because we didn't do the survey this time. We're going to try something different. So we're going to use Slido, which is this live poll app. And so we want to ask you a question here about, and the question is this: what do you think is the biggest barrier to progress in attribution? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 options, which are drawn from. I had a look back at the last time we covered attribution to the survey results then, and the main kind of things that barriers that people were saying then. Plus, I also looked at the marketing attribution report from eConsultancy to draw out some conclusions from that. So if you go whilst our speakers are speaking, if you go to slido.com, which is slido.com, on your phones. To access the poll, if you just use the event code, hashtag PFS for Performance Firestarters, PFS17. So that's slido.com, hashtag PFS17, right? And then you should see the poll. If you can just click one of those answers. So we're going to be brutal with this. You can't pick more than one, just one. So I recognise there's probably many barriers, but we're going to force you to think of just one, if that's okay. All right, and we'll do the results at the end. Okay, so without any further ado, let's get on with our speakers tonight. So our first speaker is Andrew Wilshire, who's the founder of Diametrical. So previously, Andrew was the Global Director of Advanced Analytics at Maxis, and he founded Diametrical to focus on the space between people and data, unlocking and maximising value that analytics can bring to business. So he does a lot of strategic analytics, analytic design, marketing effectiveness, writes regularly for Marketing Week. In fact, there was a brilliant piece he wrote about 4 weeks ago, I think, on marketing effectiveness and attribution. So we're delighted to have him kick us off. So welcome, please, to Andrew Wilshire.
Good evening. This is my own handiwork. Thank you, eBay, for the Lego horses. Yeah, as Neil was saying, I wrote a piece on it for Marketing Week on attribution a few weeks ago, and it was, you know, it was kind of letting off steam a little bit because I'd only just left sort of media, the big agency world, and it was the kind of thing that I'd thought about writing for a while, but thought I might get fired if I sort of raised my head above the parapet. So, and so basically, I have a kind of engineering, statistical background, and if you work in media for long enough, you start to observe that we do things in slightly odd ways, and not necessarily the most robust ways or scientifically accurate ways. Quite a lot is just get something out for the clients. And sometimes people care, and sometimes people really don't seem to care at all. So I thought that I would just have a sort of analyze what I thought was some of the issues. So moving swiftly on. Oh, last November, actually, and I looked at this in my article, but there was a problem with some of Facebook's metrics that they get caught out massively overstating the reach of their media or something like that. And I did an interview with Facebook's European head, I think, of marketing effectiveness, and sort of said, well, your metrics are rubbish. And he said, well, we find our customers are more concerned with measurement than metrics, as if that was an end to the matter. So, Pam hit face quite hard on at that point. Anyway, so I'm going to talk through each of these lovely fellows in turn and give them a bit of a rant. So, incompleteness is probably the issue that we're actually most familiar with and most willing to talk about in some extent. So we have cross-device issues, we have cross-browser issues, but more importantly than that, we only ever capture the part of the journey that we can see online. And usually that doesn't mean that we've got anything to say on price. It doesn't mean we've got anything to say on the economy at the time. We don't know that much about the people looking at it, how many kids they have, what else they do, what their hobbies are. We know some of that. But actually, some of the most important factors, we just have no idea about. There's a thing in social science that was called McNamara's fallacy. And it came out from the Vietnam War, referring to Robert McNamara, who was one of the creators of operational research and that sort of thing. And it was very much a quantitatively driven approach. Let me just read this. The McNamara fallacy was the first step is to measure whatever can be easily measured, which is OK. The second step is to disregard that which can be easily measured or to give it an arbitrary quantitative value. We see that all the time, even on brand awareness. It's like, mark your brand awareness out of 10. Third step, to presume what can't be measured easily isn't important. And then the fourth is to say that what can't be measured easily doesn't even exist. And so we have this problem in attribution where we're sort of like, well, we don't know the effect price has had. Let's not worry about it. We'll keep going anyway. We don't know if people have seen offline media. Most of the money still goes through TV and outdoor and press and radio. We don't know if they've seen that. Let's not worry about that. It'll go away if we just keep our heads down and pretend it's not there. And so you end up thinking, well, what exactly am I measuring at the end? I've got some conversions, and I've got some information, and I'll just do some sort of correlation, and I'm sure that'll be fine. It's probably not fine. Another issue that we sometimes get is that we have so much data that we have to get rid of some of it. So non-converters, who make up probably 99% of all of the information we have, we'll just take a sample of them, or we'll sweep some of them under the carpet, and then we'll not worry about that. But you introduce a whole new set of statistical problems, because you could say, well, the adverts that most people have seen before they converted might actually be the adverts that most people have seen when they didn't convert. You're not actually proving anything from a statistical point of view unless you consider your whole sample set. So yes, that's the incompleteness problem. We kind of talk about it, and we really don't do that much about it. This is my favorite picture of the day. And this kind of brings me back to Facebook in particular, and metrics. And also the general subject of viewability, which is a little bit of a hot topic. I think Facebook's standard still for a view is 1 pixel on screen for 1 second. Now, anthropologists have a term that they do when studying primitive societies and also talking about religion and that sort of thing. And they refer to magical thinking. So if someone decides to, or if a tribe decides to sacrifice a goat in order to cause the rain, then because there's no established physical process that connect these two events, and it's all in the minds of the sacrificers, if you like, then that's called magical thinking. how we can actually be in a situation where we can pretend that 1 pixel on screen for 1 second is actually having a noticeable effect on whether somebody likes your brand or buys your products or any of these things, it's absurd. If you stop to think about it for a second, you just think, that's mental. And even if you come back to the sort of standards of viewability, what's the MRC standard? It's like on screen for 2 seconds. That's pretty weak as well. There was a thing that I saw on Twitter this morning, and it came out of, I think it came out of Australia, and sorry Facebook, I'm picking on you again. But it said that if you apply the MRC standard to Facebook impressions, you bring the number of claimed impressions down to 31%. If you apply the standard of 100% viewability, which Group M are pushing for, that brings it down to 10%. And if you actually compare it to TV, so in the sense that somebody watched the advert or whatever with the sound on, that brings it down to 2%. And yet, the metrics that we get to put in our models and to build our analysis off the back of, we're still coming out at 1 pixel for 1 second. There is so much bullshit in the numbers, there's so much noise in the signal-to-noise ratio that these are effectively meaningless numbers. Sorry, was that enough of a rant? It felt like it. Final point on this, actually. I have heard it said seriously in an agency that if we don't relax the viewability constraints, then we can't spend our budget. Like, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to just spend our budget, or are we trying to sell a product? So the analogy that I came up with was like saying, if you can't buy enough champagne for your party, then make up the volume with dog piss. If you have to spend your money somewhere, then why not? Same price is a bargain. Anyway, futility. What do I mean by this? I mean that sometimes we do things just to show that we've done something. The client wants something to be measured, so we'll think, what kind of clever approach do we have that we can show that we've done something? If we go back to what we're trying to do, we are trying to improve the delivery of digital media. We're trying to improve the planning, we're trying to improve the accuracy of what we're doing. That's what all this is about. So having a measurement technique which doesn't actually help you plan is pointless. It's creating PowerPoint decks for fun, which I know we all like to do. So one of my sort of most hated concepts when it comes to digital media is the sort of user journey idea. It kind of has history in marketing. And actually, at sort of aggregate level, the funnel isn't a bad idea. At any one point, there will be some people that haven't heard of your product. There will be some people who have just heard of it. There will be some people that are interested. And there will be some people that already buy the thing. Fine. There are some people in all of these places. It's a bit of a jump to say, therefore, somebody follows the path. And we can watch them and bounce them along that path as we see. We can, like taking temperature. We can stick an awareness thermometer into them and say, well, what stage is this person at? And so we've taken it, and we've decided that what's really important in all the digital data is the order of all the steps in which they happened. So in an offline context, you've got your report. It says, well, Andrew wanted to buy a bottle of whiskey. So we followed him. We went into Tesco, didn't buy any. Went down the street, saw a billboard. Bought a newspaper. Yep, went into Sainsbury's, asked somebody where the whiskey was, went to see it, wasn't sure about the selection, came out of there, went home, read a book, saw an article on the internet, came back, 2 weeks later went to Tesco, bought a bottle of whiskey. We're into restraining order territory if it was an offline. But the most critical point is that you're powerless to make somebody else duplicate that path. You can't say, I found the most effective path that somebody should follow, and therefore I'm going to march them around the internet from touch point to touch point, making that happen. Now, that's not to say you can't make your sort of most likely path more likely. Typically something like only 1% of converters follow the most successful path. And what that means is that anything you do to make the most successful path more likely, you're making thousands of other paths more likely, millions of other paths. So unless you assess the impact that you're making on all of those other paths, including the unsuccessful ones, then it's a bit of a jump to just say, this is the path, and we should make people follow it. You can't. It's pointless. Probably stop it. Yes, this cost me £6 on eBay. I'm quite pleased with him. If you know your book of Revelations or your Johnny Cash, then it'll be like, I saw a pale horse, and him that sat on him was death, and hell followed with him. Randomness is death to attribution. There's so much noise, there's so much random events happening as people journey around the internet that what we're dealing with is nearly all noise. There's very little signal in there whatsoever. The thing I always hated most about attribution reports was the way they changed. Every single week, every single month, it was, you should be doing something different. Now, people are actually quite predictable. I think sort of your web browsing habits are a good example of the Pareto principle. You probably spend 80% of your time on 20% of websites that you ever go to. There's probably half a dozen that you log on to daily, or maybe there's only 3 that you log on to daily. There's probably only 10 you log on to on a week or something like that. And now you get some other little random effects and so on. But on the whole, you're quite predictable. Same for products. Most people have a fairly standard rota of products, or at least category of products. That's not changing. Most people have a fairly predictable or static media consumption. The human brain doesn't suddenly switch from one week to saying, oh, I can take in information from a banner more than I can from a pop-up or from a sort of sidebar or anything like that. None of these things are changing. So why would, from one week to the next, is the publishers that are most successful for your product completely change? Why would the format of the advert completely change from one week to the next? And what you're actually seeing is basically you're chasing noise around the internet. If you get a spike over here last week, and you say, great, we're going to throw all our money into there, that spike probably just by chance. And worse than that, it's probably not going to be repeated. You'll be actually damaging your performance because you're chasing things that happened last week. It's like looking at the football results and seeing which of the 100-to-1 shots came off last week, and you're going to bet on that team next week. That's a sure way to lose your money. And it's a similar problem with media. Unless you can actually sort of think through, like, give me a reason why this set of publishers that were brilliant last week are rubbish this week, then you're probably just chasing noise. I was told I should sort of have a slightly more upbeat section. Scottish, it doesn't come naturally. But however, so what to take from all this? I'm not saying that we should all just pack up and go home, or well, maybe I am saying that. But the sort of important thing to progress is to, when you have a solution, is to actually understand what's wrong with it. Because there's lots of things that don't work very well. Barb doesn't work very well as a TV measurement thing. But we know where it works well and what it doesn't, what it's suitable for, what it doesn't, when it leads to good decisions, when it leads to bad decisions. So understanding the curiosities and the sort of the weak parts of your own solution means that you can carry on using it, but just make your decisions in a slightly more informed way. It's also worth thinking about, do you actually need to do individual level attribution? If you're dropping £1 million which is roughly equal to like 300 TVRs. If you're dropping £1 million into the market, you should be able to see that response at an aggregate level. If you cannot see it, then it's probably not working. And it's probably not having a long-term brand effect, which is our other favorite for disguising poor performance. So in that sense, if you have a serious digital budget, then you should be looking at measuring it in the same way as you do with TV and outdoor and press and do some sort of econometrics. Again, not perfect, but probably better than a lot of the solutions that are currently being used. Also, you probably can't optimize yourself to success on a second-by-second basis. There's an awful lot of money going into tech stacks to enable that to be done. All of them running off noise and all of them scraping fairly chunky amounts of your money as they go. And what is it? It's only like 25% or something of the money that you spend, the client spends on an advert actually makes it to the publisher. All of the exchanges and so on that are between the cash and the advert are all scraping their share off. So there's immediate inefficiencies. Final point, really. We're not just flailing about in the dark, or we don't have to just flail about in the dark. The scientific method is based about have an idea, experiment, sort of see the response, and then if it works, do more of that. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. All of the sort of advertising greybeards have said for a long time, we should get back to marketing principles. We should think of who our customers are, where to find them, what the segments are, and all of the effective ways of reaching them. If we think in that way and say, actually, it's fairly obvious which sites we should go to. JP Morgan Chase in Australia manually checked every single one of the sites that their digital advertising was appearing on, and they canned 99% of them and didn't see a drop-off in performance. Staggering. But they had an idea about the sites where the people they were after were actually visiting. They did it, they measured it, and they succeeded. So have a plan. Write down what you expect to happen. See if it actually did happen, and then do more or less accordingly. All right, I think that's me. Thank you very much.
So, thanks, Andrew. So, incompleteness, absurdity, futility, randomness, and the fallacy of the idea of controlling user journeys is an interesting one, and the danger of chasing the noise around the internet. But understand the limits and embrace the scientific method. Really like that. All right, so on to our next speaker. So, delighted to have Katherine Munford, who's the Managing Director of Data Decisions in the UK, where she leads a team of about 65 people delivering marketing effectiveness consultancies to some of the world's biggest brands. So Katherine joined Data Decisions as an Associate Director in 2006 and has played an instrumental role in the company's rapid growth, helping to internationalise the brand to 12 offices globally. And she's got 15 years of industry experience, and her technical expertise spans statistical analysis and consumer research. So delighted to have a speaker at Performance Firestarters. So welcome to Katherine.
Good evening, everyone. I think I'm going to deliver a slightly more positive outlook over the next 20 minutes than Andrew. And I'm going to kick off with this very well-known quote because it really illustrates my view on attribution. So this is from George Box, a well-known mathematician and professor of statistics. Now, in my view, models and frameworks, whilst having many, many flaws, are still really, really useful for driving business decisions. And I absolutely agree with Andrew's point. What we should really be doing is focusing on where the limitations are and make sure that we're not fixated on one magic solution, because actually the best approach is quite often to use a number of different approaches to address all of the business questions that you have. So if we take last click, and I think I can do this quickly after Andrew's annihilation once again, but there are clearly a number of well-known flaws or criticisms. First of all, it's really only focused on conversion, so potentially ignoring many preceding touch points that may have really converted or helped to convert that sale. The inflated ROIs are also a big problem. So, some of the key questions that clients have are much more top level, not just looking into the details. So really wanting to understand how should we be spending the marketing budget across countries, brands, media channels. And actually, it's just not possible to compare the inflated ROIs that come from last click, where one touch point gets the full credit, with ROIs that you get across many other sources for TV, for outdoor, using other techniques, for example, marketing mix modeling. And then we've got some of the bigger picture challenges, no offline influence, which again is an enormous gap, not capturing the impact of TV and other channels in driving that online activity. And actually, last click attribution is really just focusing on one part of the brand ecosystem, which may be fine for an online brand, but actually for a number of retailers, it's really important as well to understand how some of those online touch points are ultimately getting consumers to purchase in store as well. So, with so many challenges, it does to some extent seem surprising that so many clients are still using last click. And I think that there are a number of different reasons why this is the case. And I think the first and one of the biggest is just the wide accessibility of last click. It's easy to access on a number of web analytics platforms and ad servers. It also is available as a default, often for free, which again can be quite persuasive. But actually, for clients who aren't doing any measurement at all of digital, that is at least a step forward. It does have some capability, because what it will do in some cases is actually give clients a reasonable read on some of the channels that are actually harvesting their sales. It will be good for A/B testing, giving a quick response to a few measurement queries. So in the short term, actually, last click could be okay for some clients. I think the big challenge is we're running the risk in the long term of cutting some of those budgets that are ultimately really important in pushing new consumers into that pipeline. So lots of reasons why people are doing it. The last one I've noted here is that it's completely uncomplicated. So it's easy to understand and interpret what last click is. And actually, if you compare that to some of the data-driven approaches that may appear more complex or black box, actually, it's quite difficult to pull apart the fact that that was the last touch before sale. And I think that that, coupled with that wide accessibility, makes it quite a safe option for some clients to select, rather than moving into some unknown territory that requires that broader leap of faith. But it's not just the challenges with the approach itself. I think there's loads of other barriers that are actually holding clients back. So first of all, there are loads of options, lots of different methodologies, and coupled with that, quite a few of them have that high perceived level of complexity. It's a black box solution. One of the things that we see quite often when we are talking to clients about measurement solutions is that there's a really concerning level of last click shock or panic, where actually people are so worried about moving to a new solution that might have different results that they are absolutely petrified of something coming up and implying that perhaps they've made the wrong decisions historically, or maybe they've missed some big opportunities. But actually, we have to get past this in the industry by focusing more on the end result and the end benefits that you can have, rather than the difference that you might get in your result. And I think all of these things would actually be more straightforward if clients were actually clear on the different alternatives on offer. And I don't think that's the case. I think that they have a sense of the extra work, the extra investment, but they're not really sure how much these data-driven solutions are going to be better for their business than last click. So a number of challenges, but absolutely it's time to move on. And the reason is because there are so many different solutions available now that will really have a big impact on clients' marketing effectiveness. We've got to get past this mindset of needing to move to perfection immediately, because it's just not realistic. So we're not going to go from caterpillar on one side to a beautiful butterfly in one jump. It's going to be a process. The landscape around us is going to continue to change, and we need to be agile in our response to that and prepared to adapt our measurement frameworks as we go along. So, focusing on data-driven solutions in particular, this is a natural and obvious step for any clients who have been using Last Click. And there's lots of different options out there, but to move importantly to an approach that is not rule-based, may sound official, it's absolutely not, it's completely subjective, but to use something that is ultimately driven by the data. I absolutely agree with the point Andrew made. That needs to include the full sample, not just converters, but looking at all of the non-converters as well. And I think that's really essential. But we also need to take some time to think about what the right KPIs are. And actually, for most clients, that's probably going to be a number of different KPIs to help them really assess the opportunity they have at different elements of that consumer journey. Moving to data-driven attribution, again, it's not a perfect solution, but there will be massive implications for the client in terms of things they can implement, again, that will drive their return on investment. And outside moving to a more data-driven approach, I think there are a number of things that we can also do to kind of unlock the potential. And one of them is to involve critics in the process, because there will be some, probably not as negative as Andrew, you'd hope, but you're likely to have people who are going to be massively skeptical of a data-driven approach. And I think where that's the case, you've got to get them involved really early, give them an opportunity to air concerns, understand what they'd like to get out, and ultimately use it to set realistic expectations. We need to realise that actually data-driven attribution, it's not just data. There's a massive consulting element which is powered by technology or powered by measurement solutions. So it might be more painful with a data-driven approach. All the data's not all going to be neatly in one place. You've got to actually have a think about where that data sits and how you can connect it. For finance clients, for example, it's really worthwhile actually linking up their call center data with a lot of their web data. But that does take time, but you need that consultative stage with the clients to understand the business and how you can drive forward. There's no magic button, unfortunately. Results at the right frequency, I think, is another really important point. And Andrew was referring to the instability that you can often see within attribution models. And I think this in part comes with a little bit too much of a single-minded focus on speed, let's have everything daily, let's have everything in real time. Because not all of those decisions are actually going to be activated in real time. So again, I think we need to think about a sensible frequency of actually looking at our data. Because if you want a reliable read on the most effective publishing sites, don't do that daily. Take a longer run of data, you're going to get a much more robust answer, which is going to feed through to much better predictions and conversion into effectiveness. Another challenge that we need to overcome when we think about the data-driven attribution is a bit of a framework to connect the buying silos. We've got all these different platforms and systems for doing separate things, search and display and social. And actually, we need to think about ways to connect them. And we need to think more broadly about ways to think about how we can actually optimize across them as well. So there's a few technical challenges there, but I think there's also something that the agencies can think about in terms of structure and process to really facilitate data-driven attribution, because I don't think we're really set up to make it as easy as it could be. And the last thing is, you absolutely have to be prepared to experiment. So, if on an attribution project we're doing for a client, there could be a 20% improvement. They may go to 10%. You need to be prepared to experiment with the budget. And some occasions, it's not going to work, but you need to understand that, learn, move on. And where it does work, you need to stop and take the moment to actually share that success story so that it does help to drive confidence in the approach that you're using. Moving on to a slightly broader topic, it's really interesting how much of the discussion and the narrative is still on the technique. It's on the measurement approach. We're still talking about whether last click is an acceptable measurement solution or whether there's something better. Of course, it's important, but we also need to think about how we can move beyond this. We need more focus on the implementation and on the activation side of things. Ultimately, this is where the real benefit is had, and I think it's vastly overlooked at the moment. So moving forward, there will be, increasing opportunities through machine learning. So instead of having debates over which is the best measurement process, we'll computationally be able to look at that and actually learn the best strategy and activate that in real time. Clearly, that's a journey, but what it will do is it will actually take this debate out of it. It starts to become redundant because what we're then doing is we're much more focused on the results and the outcomes, which is really where we need to be to push better solutions out to clients. So I've just spent 10 minutes, maybe more, talking to you about what is essentially quite a small micro view of measurement, just looking at the digital options. So we can make improvements on the digital attribution, but actually we need to step back and think about the future and what we need to focus on, and even in the present. But it should be attribution, not digital attribution. Similarly, it shouldn't be offline attribution for clients that spend, largely and are locked into looking at marketing mix modeling ROIs on a regular basis. Sooner or later, we need to find pragmatic ways to look at how we can manage the whole measurement framework and optimize across all of those channels. So consistent measurement is really important. Also accounting for all of those other factors. One of the biggest flaws that we have for digital is just not taking any of those other factors into account. And ultimately, the goal should be total optimization. How can we move money into the areas where it's going to drive the greatest returns? Now, the holy grail is likely to be perfect individual level data. As we get more and more data, how much can we ultimately line up against individuals? But I think we need to think about how realistic this actually is. And in my view, it will at best be a very, very long transition to this type of perfect data, and there will be so many hurdles along the way. So first of all, if we start with the digital touchpoint challenges, we obviously have challenges with cross-device. We know Google and Facebook are making a lot of headway in this area, but I think questions will remain as to whether we're really connecting everyone. Then we have the touchpoint history. So every time different ad servers are used, you've got the history in different locations. That needs connecting up. But if we want it to be perfect data, we need the touchpoints to be connected up across all media channels. And actually, we're starting to move forward in terms of more individual level data for outdoor and TV, but we have a really long way to go. There's lots more that needs to be done. And even if we can get there, then we still need to make that ultimate connection with purchases, not just online purchases, but all purchases. And actually, for categories like FMCG, where so much takes place in store, that is a huge challenge. We've got retailer loyalty cards helping to some extent here, but not all retailers have them. Consumers shop around. And I think the biggest question is, even if all of this data was available, would it be in a shareable format that would allow us to connect it up and analyze it, and actually, would it be legal to do so? So we're a long way off this type of approach. But there are other techniques that have been in existence for a long time that help to address a lot of these challenges. And that's something that we can take on board and start to do now. So specifically, market mix modeling is really well suited to capture some of those bigger drivers of sales, the impact of the economy, of weather, of price, promotions, and importantly, of all media effects. So actually, if we're able to use a marketing mix modeling solution, we're actually able to get all of these things. So short and long-term drivers, not the conversions, but also the longer-term drivers that will impact sales. consistent ROIs that will enable us to optimize budgets across all media and, importantly, online and in-store. So the way that we tend to use market mix modeling, or one of the ways you can do it, is to get your overall read on your digital performance. As Andrew says, if you put enormous budgets into a given media channel, you absolutely should expect to see the impact on total sales. So applying a technique like market mix modeling would enable you to get a top-line measurement, for example, of total display, total generic, total affiliates. Now, the beauty of capturing it in this framework is that what you're getting there is the truly incremental impact of that activity. You're accounting for changes in price, distribution, and all of those other factors. So it's giving a much more realistic view on return and performance. What it can't do is give all of those really granular insights on campaigns and on publishing sites. But what we can do is actually make that more personal by bringing in the individual level data, bringing in the data-driven attribution to actually start to dig deeper into a lot of those insights. So ultimately, it's giving us the best of both worlds by using two different solutions that are well suited to answering different questions. So a typical output could look something like this. So you'd be looking at the overall contribution to sales. Importantly, you'd be accounting for your base sales, your overriding loyalty that you might have over time, and then looking at the incremental impacts on top of that, the impact from weather, promotions, and all of the other media channels. But then what we can do is bring in the digital side of things to enable that deeper dive into the relative effectiveness at a much more granular level. So I've touched on a few points. I'm just going to sum up a few of the key takeouts from the past 15, 20 minutes. So first of all, it's time to move on. Absolutely. It's time to embrace a data-driven approach to attribution. But we need to reframe the question. We should be thinking about attribution and not just digital attribution. We also need to get better at talking not just about the techniques. We need to look beyond that, focus on implementation, focus on where the benefit can be made. And that's really vital, I think, for bringing clients on this journey with us. The thing that holds us back is that last click shock, that fear of changing things. And we really need to make sure that we can embrace change and be agile, because we are going to need to be continually changing. So we need to get comfortable with the fact that it's got to be a marketing effectiveness journey. And I think that what we can do to play our role in the industry is just really help to put the spotlight on the effectiveness, what's really happening to the business as a result. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Katherine. Some really interesting points there. So I think not fixated on one magic solution, a number of different methods. I think there was a really interesting thought about computationally looking for better solutions. So maybe we'll come back to that in the questions. So next we have Tobit. So Tobit Michael is the Group Business Director from Exelis, the performance marketing division of Havas. Prior to joining Exelis, he was managing partner at iCrossing. So he was leading a team there of 60 experts across a range of different disciplines, including paid media, content, affiliate, SEO and so on, and was delivering market-leading award-winning digital marketing campaigns there. So delighted again to have Tobit speaking. So welcome please to Tobit Michael. Welcome.
Hello. Hello. Is the mic on? Good. There we go. So, attribution, very, very hot topic in the industry, as I'm sure you're all aware. But also kind of a perennially hot topic in the industry. You heard that there was one of these sessions 4 years ago, but going back even further than that, it's been sort of the next big thing, certainly for as long as I've been involved, so over a decade now, but probably going back a way before then. So why is it that everybody's so excited? Why is it sort of seen as this next sort of champion big thing? So ultimately it's, as I said on the other side, it's the idea that we can all become performance marketers. We can all sort of see everything that we're spending, everything that we're investing, all the insights and stuff we drive, right down to the last kind of penny. And in fact, when you look at all the excitement, all the expectation specifically, really it can kind of be categorized into sort of three main buckets. The first of which is pretty obviously measurement. So the expectation now is you get your attribution rolled out and suddenly you can see every single sort of impression on Facebook, valid or not. You can see every sort of TVR, every affiliate sale which comes through. All of that, the guy on the bus who's using your product, which someone saw and has influenced, all of that straight away, attribution is going to solve that. You're going to see where that's coming from. The next bit of expectation is the understanding. So you wave your magic wand, you suddenly have this attribution model in place, and immediately you know, right, well, if I unlock 20% more budget, I can invest it in place X, and I'm going to get Y more revenue out the bottom. And then ultimately, that's kind of the crux of it. It's affecting that change. Once you've got this in place, that super accurate measurement, the unparalleled understanding, then affecting that change, you're going to have no problem getting buy-in. You're going to have no issues at the bottom of the funnel deciding sort of where to cut budget, where maybe it's not incremental. Nothing at the top of the funnel either, where you want to invest more kind of in your TV or whatever it may be to fill that awareness up. You'll walk into your FD's office and the purse strings will just fall open at your very presence. So already you can probably tell by the flippant tone and the pretty scathing build up to this that actually the expectations we have, or as an industry, the way it's being sold in, is perhaps somewhat removed from the reality of it. There are elements of truth in all of that, but of course there is a lot of optimism as well. So ultimately, it seems like a huge amount to be pinning on a piece of tech. But by looking at each of these individually and really understanding what it is that attribution brings to those, you should be able to prepare yourselves to really kind of reap the most benefits possible from it. So first of all, looking at the measurement piece. So from this, it's important really to understand that actually, this is everything that attribution is. Attribution in and of itself is just a measurement tool. Now, that's far, far from insignificant. In fact, as we start to look at all of our channels, or as many channels as possible, in a single place, optimizing towards kind of whatever metrics we choose, it will immediately impact how we start to plan our media, how we optimize, and where we start to put those budgets. If anybody's moved from a sort of siloed last click model to just a sort of deduplicated last click model, you'll immediately start to recognize that the way in which you measure it inherently impacts the decisions you make. And with that in mind, actually deciding what to measure is key. So at the moment, you'll have huge, huge numbers of different goals, different sort of measures of success. And some of those are in place to bridge the gap to make light of the imperfections which we have on this tracking through. And some of them actually are really, really kind of fundamental. So if you're just focused on driving revenue, and that's all you focus on, you may be missing actually the opportunity to grow your customer base and get new customers. Probably good for year one. Year two, you may be sort of seeing that dwindle. And the crucial thing with this, as has been gone over sort of in detail, is really understanding what the limitations are, because none of the tools out there are entirely comprehensive. And even within those, your particular setup is going to have specific blind spots which are absolutely unique to yourself. So ensuring that you know what these limitations are will set you up in good stead. So moving on, obviously measurement, as I say, is kind of the entirety of what attribution is, but it does inherently start to affect those other things, so the understanding and affecting change. So with the understanding, the crucial thing here is really that you hold on to the kind of importance of experts. The temptation is that as soon as you start to see this in one place, you can say, well, I know what's happening in display, I know what's happening in affiliates, I know what's happening on TV, it's fine, I can just make these decisions from on high without kind of going down into the detail and really, really understanding what's what. So actually having experts involved who can understand what the weather was doing, whether or not kind of your competitors had a sale, if there was some sort of outage on the site, etc., is really, really key. Furthermore, understanding sort of where you can invest more is really crucial here as well. What you'll find with every single channel, particularly when you're starting to look at it as a performance channel, is that you'll have kind of the efficiency curve where you sort of start to reach that saturation, and further investment beyond there is going to really sort of actually just waste budget. If you're just looking at it in a data sheet, obviously this is going to be kind of overlooked. You're going to start spending money here and it's just going to get burnt up. So again, that importance of experts is crucial. And what you'll find when you are measuring sort of across all of these channels is that no longer can you have your SEO team just sort of locked away in a cupboard, furiously kind of focusing in on this. You're actually going to have to start communicating with all the wider marketing teams as well. Hopefully that's fairly straightforward. But ultimately, what both of those things culminate in is interrogating the why. Not just saying the data is here and we're going to sort of optimize down or we're going to optimize up, but actually understanding why certain things are happening. The temptation when you're just looking at the data is to say something is good, turn it up, something is bad, turn it down. But what you miss without kind of that communication, without kind of engaging with experts, is actually the reasoning behind that and how you can then start to push that out further. So the old sort of rule of thumb goes that as soon as you start to measure something, you'll start to game it. And a good example of this in digital, for last click, which we'll all be very, very familiar with, is for paid search. Now, if you're just kind of looking at it in isolation, not communicating through, not interrogating the why, the temptation there, certainly in the old days, was to say, well, we're getting targeted on ROI, on CPA, whatever it may be, and so all that budget starts going into your brand terms. Now, what will happen, of course, just in that channel by itself, the ROI is really, really high throughout, but the revenue over time starts to decline, and so clearly there you're just kind of optimizing away into nothing. And by making everything a performance channel, you run that same risk if you don't have those experts in place, if you don't start interrogating kind of why things are and are not successful. Which brings me on to that affecting change. So the first two pieces on this seem kind of obvious. Actually transitioning to the sort of the targets that you have as a business or your clients have as a business, and from that establishing really clear sort of clarity of purpose throughout. Now, the reason this is important and worth bringing to the fore is that these business targets exist, well, hopefully, but too often they're actually divided up by kind of head of marketing, whoever it may be, and then sectioned out to the different teams, the different agencies, whoever's kind of looking after it, without actually the wider communication of what it is that the business is trying to achieve and how the business is trying to achieve it. And in doing so, in having this clear communication, this clarity of purpose, not just by channel, but actually for marketing as a whole, be that driving new customers, be that driving revenue, be that shifting brand perceptions, whatever it may be, it's absolutely vital when you start to measure everything as performance, because it may be that you have unintended effects from certain channels. It may be that things are performing much worse than kind of anticipated. And so if you know what the overall business goals are, you're much more likely to sort of uncover this and go forward. So with that in mind, the idea of having that kind of testing culture is absolutely vital. Again, optimizing away to nothing, being the sort of risk you run. And actually, yeah, as was covered in both previous talks, this testing culture, the willingness to put money to experiment in other places and also to sort of fail fast is absolutely key. The astute amongst you will be looking at this and thinking, well, actually, this has very little to do with attribution. And you are absolutely on the money there. It's entirely right, because attribution is purely the measurement part of this. But if you don't organize your business and your marketing in this way so that you are ready to communicate, you are ready to interrogate data, you're ready to sort of understand why and to test new things based on that data, and actually just implementing an attribution tool is really, really going to be sort of limited in the impact it's going to have. And so it's uncharacteristically good news for this evening. You can start impacting this absolutely immediately, and you can start encouraging your clients through educating them about how channels work, how they interact, and start to sort of reap these benefits already. So by putting the business structure to affect change at the front and center, you already inherently start to move away from just looking at things in isolation, in channels. And from that, you'll, improved measurement, improved understanding will kind of flow forward. And ultimately, what you'll find from that is that you unlock kind of the many of the benefits that you're hoping for from attribution anyway, without necessarily having to put that in place. But when you do put it in place, of course, it will sort of rocket fuel, propel it into the next level. And you will get to that sort of holy grail, which everyone is expecting from the tech. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. So that's a really interesting point there, and thought about transition to business goals, business targets naturally being divided up by functions and given to different agencies and things. So that clarity of purpose, bringing it together, it's an interesting thought. Brilliant. All right, so on to our last speaker. So delighted to have Kevin Joyner, Director of Planning and Insight at Crowd. So Kevin oversees the work of Crowd's analytics team. He's worked in market research, branding, advertising for about 11 years, had roles in client service, data analysis and display, media planning and buying, PPC management, and lots of things actually. Even worked in procurement at the BBC. So there you go. So Kevin's a Cambridge English graduate, was originally trying to become an actor, believe it or not, but isn't working out. So there you go. Fantastic. So welcome to Kevin. Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, so one of the things that I like to do is get up in the morning around, if I can, around an hour before is really necessary, so that I can stare at the objects in my kitchen. Yeah, would you believe it? Like, it was at a moment, this is my fridge, by the way, it was exactly a moment like this that I suddenly realized I'm going to start my Firestarters presentation with a picture of my kitchen fridge. It's a very useful time, that time in the morning when you're like not quite awake yet. You know, it's like a time to consider the big questions. What's it all about, you know? Like, why are we even doing this? Attribution, for example, like what's all that about then? And I'm absolutely delighted that like everybody, all of the people who've spoken already this afternoon have mentioned this. What we're striving for is omniscience. They didn't use that word, but you know, it's like completeness in our view of the audience that we're trying to market to. It's not enough to be accurate. We recognise that that's not valuable enough if our view isn't completely unassailable. Now, the reason that we want to have this perfect omniscience is that we have to get rid of these caveats. Like, you know, having to explain to our client like why they have to interpret the model in a certain way because Facebook impressions aren't in it, or like because there's a thing that's missing, is what gets in the way of you know, getting better at this, getting better at attribution, uptake of the tech that we've developed, or the models that we really believe are going to help us do this better, because that basically is like what we do for a living, right? You know, we sell digital advertising, which is amazing. You know, it's like the best way you can spend your marketing budget. It's absolutely amazing, and the most amazing thing about it is that it keeps getting more amazing all the time because we can optimize it, and it's uniquely amazing at being optimized. I'm kind of like hamming it up, obviously, quite a lot there, but actually, that is kind of the way that we use that word. But when you stop to think about the definition of optimization, there's nothing in this that says what we're doing is actually any good at all. So this is the action of making the best or most effective use of a situation. Like, we're just trying to do the best we can, you know, like. But we don't say it like that, do we? And it's really close to another definition. In fact, optimization is as close to that as it is to the way that we really use it. You know, kind of my point is that we're kidding ourselves if we think that like what we're doing is any good. and it's great and it's noble that we're trying to make it better, and that's one of the tools that we have is attribution, like trying to make digital advertising better. But it doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean that like we've got so much evolution to do in the industry that we operate in, and so we should be looking for the leaps. You know, like I think that it is noble to be trying to like make things better. But we should be looking for the really significant mutations that will send us down the road to more significant progress. So I just want to make a few points as to like why I'm right. So nobody clicks on adverts. This is like less than 1%, and the UK is like in the middle of Europe. But basically, click-through rates are very, very low. We all know that. You are approximately as likely to click on an ad by mistake as you are to do it on purpose. Like only 9% of all, the fonts have gone a bit funny, but only 9% of all impressions even get more than a second. This is an eye tracking study. And that's partly because only a third of ads are even viewable by like a special definition. But like, if the ad is on screen, you've got about 25% of even resting your eyes on it for more than a second. So this is totally made up, but to illustrate a point, we don't click on adverts. We dismiss them if we can, or we maybe will look at them for a second. But by far and away, the thing that happens to an advert is that it's ignored. And that's because it's the turd at the beginning of that evolution that I showed you a minute ago. Like nobody likes adverts, right? And this is why ad blocking continues to rise. It's why Google is building ad blocking into Chrome. I think it's in beta already, because it's an attempt to take control of this situation. But like what I think we should be doing, like as well as the very noble things to do with attribution, is trying to build an industry that's to do with people like liking the product and finding it useful. It's happened because this is what advertising is. It's like it's surveillance marketing. We've got this idea that probably stems from television or something, that what we should do with our industry is collect as much data as we can about everybody that we can, and try and figure out from all that data that we collected, like what's the ad that I can put in front of them that's least likely to make them hate me, you know? So that's kind of what attribution is all about, and it reflects an imbalance. Like, and this is probably from television. It's a broadcast mentality where this, by the way, represents like everybody, people, right? And brands. So there is control. There's more control and more power over the channel and what we think people want and the way that we sell the product in brands than the respect and kind of like the amount that we listen and the balance that we offer to people. It's not what the internet is about. Like, the internet and technology is the opposite of one-to-many. It's like many-to-many, peer-to-peer. There's no reason why the brand in the whole system needs to be any more significant than an individual person, one person, because technology can make that happen. It's why that imbalance in our industry is why the man who invented the internet is like, he hasn't got any hair left. You know, he's saying, that was a mean thing to say, but he hasn't responded to my tweet, so. But Tim Berners-Lee says we've got to save the internet, like we're doing really destructive things. He says, and this is from that Guardian article, number one, and I'll come back to it, we've lost control of our personal data. Number two, it's too easy for misinformation to spread on the web. Digital advertising has done this, by the way. He's talking about fake news, and it's the idea that it pays to lie to people, make stuff up, because you can show ads against it. And actually now that's undermining the very fabric of our society because it's degrading our politics and our political system. But he says that it's happened because of this. We've lost control of our personal data. He talks about a solution for that. I'll come on to it. But the point, kind of, I think, of this presentation is that if we solve those problems with online media, we will make advertising good, and we will also make it way more measurable than ever. So I'll try and explain why I think that's true. This is, like other people have thought of this before, but this is Tim Berners-Lee's recommended solution for the problems that I've highlighted. that we all have our own silo. I have my silo. You have yours, like not you, but like this lady with the mustard jumper has her own silo. Like everybody has their own data silo that collects everything about you and nothing about anybody else. And it's not just your online behavior, it's your financial history, and it's powered by a login. You need a key for your silo that is universal and independent of the people who are trying to sell you and like make money out of you. Something like this has already been built. This is Google My Activity, just one example, by the way. So this was launched about a year ago now. Very little publicity. We still hear about it now when we hear about, like, if you're concerned about your privacy, then please log into Google, like read our privacy policy and look at Google My Activity. What's amazing about this? So this is centered around my login. It's not to do with cookies. It's a record of all the services that I've accessed in relation to my Google login. I can go in here, and if I don't like this, I can delete it because I don't want Google to use it to understand who I am. That's control, right? That's balance. Another way of looking at this, like feed of everything I've done, is as a conversion funnel. Because if this is capturing everything I've ever done, it's like touch points like we've never had them, right? Like, and one person's touch point might be another person's conversion, right? But this is the funnel towards like whatever it is that a person does, right? So it's a path. So let's say that this isn't Google My Activity, it's kevinjoyner.com. So this is my data pod now. And it's more than just Google services. It's powered by an independent login. So it's got my financial information in there and like purchases. It's the holy grail, basically, that isn't possible by any other means. You don't need Omniscience anymore. It doesn't exist, by the way, because like everything is there about me. That we're not trying to be omniscient anymore. You do still need modeling, right? So you still need like clever people to figure out like what's the relationship between these things, and like is my product working well in the way that I intended? Is my hypothesis correct, right? You don't need caveats anymore because the way that you use this is as strong as the model that you prove, and there's nothing missing. So, if we've got an advertising ecosystem where all the control is with me about my data, and it's complete, then you might imagine a world where advertising is actually useful, right? It's something that you ask for. It has to be useful, otherwise the people who create it won't get access to any of the data that powers it. And like you may already be thinking as well, or scratching your heads, I don't know, but like advertising and the product have become very, very close. They're like, like the word advertising probably is wrong in this future that I hope for. So incidentally, this is like, if you don't recognize it, is the logo for Google Assistant, which powers the like Alexa equivalent. I'm sorry for defining it in that way. Yeah, but I don't know what my point was. So I think we're heading in the right direction. And this was this is a blog post that was published by Google, screenshotted from a mobile phone, which is why it looks a bit funny, in January. That was like titled as a change to YouTube, but this was the announcement that the YouTube website sometime this year wouldn't be supporting third-party cookies, and that the audiences that we reach through it are defined by a login rather than the third-party cookie, which is essentially the lifeblood of surveillance marketing. So we are putting the pieces in place here to do something, to take a leap, right? But there's an issue, which is that I believe that login does need to be independent from the advertising companies, because Google have a really powerful, almost ubiquitous login. Facebook have a really powerful, almost ubiquitous login. Amazon's in a similar place. But none of those guys are going to like just help people collect data about themselves and give it to their competitor. So we need one login that's independent of them all. So I'll end on this. I think that there's a version of the future where the internet, politics, and society are saved, where all of us can access more complete data sets than we can imagine, with permission when we deserve it. We can make advertising good, and because all that waste is gone, right, and we're focusing on making things that people actually want and respond to, we all make more money. So let the data go.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm not sure we're ever going to get to the point where politics is saying the way things are, but anyway, so really interesting. It reminds me, actually, there was a movement called VRM. So it's the idea of CRM, customer relationship management, to VRM, which was like, you know, the same sort of idea, which is a really interesting idea, and I like the way you've kind of thought about that, so that's fantastic. So we've got about 15, 20 minutes for questions now. So can I just invite the panellists, if you wouldn't mind just grabbing one of these chairs at the front here, and then, yeah, is that all right? Thanks, Adriana. And we'll just put them up in front of the screen here. So can we, just whilst we're setting up here, can I just ask for the Slido results to be put up on the screen, and we'll take a look at those. Brilliant. Okay, so we've got, scores on doors. I'll be all right, I'll stand here, thanks, Adriana. So joined up data tech, perhaps unsurprisingly, we talked a lot about that, obviously, right up the top there, 31%. Cultural inertia, poor attribution modelling, so the way in which we're doing modelling, 18% each. Then we've got education of clients and lack of priority coming up. And then way down the bottom, we've got people skills only at 4%, and then education and agencies, perhaps unsurprisingly, at 2%. But I think actually taking that's an interesting one, because Kath, you talk quite about, I love the idea of sort of last click shock. So this sort of fear of moving on, and that sort of cultural inertia sort of being right there as sort of second on the list there. So just perhaps from anyone here, in terms of like ways of getting past that and just helping clients to get past that sort of fear of moving from something that actually they've grown very comfortable with, any sort of tips or kind of examples of how you've managed to do that?
I think it all comes down to focusing on the benefit and what the client will get out of the new solution. So very much cultural, I think. And it's one thing to look back and learn lessons about why something is different, but we need a much bigger highlight. So one of the things that we quite often do when we move clients onto a data-driven solution is kind of run a wash-up session where we run the comparisons, we talk about it, and then we look at how much more money they're going to make and have that as being a key focus of the session. But yeah, it's a massive barrier, and it really shouldn't be. And
just to kind of build on that, Toby, you were talking a bit about the kind of unifying the kind of the goals and how they're sort of separated by functions and different teams in organisations, and I mean that's a cultural thing, isn't it, as much as anything else? Like trying to join that up in a client business. So have you had any success with that? Or
sure. So I think the key thing on that is really sort of an education piece. Be that to the client, be that to sort of other channel teams, that could be in-house, that could be other agencies, but it's understanding, first of all, that ultimately if you're not looking after the client's best interests, which all of this is aimed to do, then you're not going to be making money with them very long. And ultimately I think people are very receptive to that these days, but also then understanding what you can do, be it imperfect, which will help move it forward, and that kind of appreciation for the fact it's going to be imperfect is a really key thing. I hope it wasn't 4 years ago that I was here and heard an attribution talk, but it's kind of perfect being the enemy of good, which is a trap that everyone falls into, and you find clients who are paralysed to move on because of that shock, because they're like, oh well, yeah, but we can't measure X, Y, Z. The Facebook stuff is all basically imaginary. And because of that, they're unwilling to make any change. So if you can get past that sort of, that perfect being the enemy of good, then you can start to do some testing. Not all of it will be successful. And if you can get people braced for that ahead of time, and all the better. But yeah, it's that education and that sort of, I suppose, easing the fear of failure that kind of helps get those initial steps.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, you were talking about this sort of fallacy of the kind of control over the user journey, that we can, push people from one point to the next point to the next point. This kind of fallacy of that idea. So, and perfect being the enemy of good. So, how do you get past that? Because if it's like clients sort of culturally would probably feel more comfortable with the feeling that I can control this, and even if they can't really. So, how do you kind of get past that?
Gosh, that's a big question. I think Katherine and Tobit, they're right. You have to you look at the benefit. I mean, everyone, we're only in this game to make money. We're only in it to make money for us and for our clients. It's in a mutual interest that we both succeed. And in a sense, you always have to look at people's motivations. Sort of a good economist, and say, well, what does my client need? And that might just be, how do I help this person get a promotion? So it's you frame, you say, how can I put the best sheen, third polishing possibly, on the activity we did, and that if you can demonstrate that measuring it in a different way can put a better gloss, or can it say this will make your next campaign twice as effective, then I think you can speak to everyone's self-interest on that.
Yeah, great, okay. We'll open the questions up in a minute. If I can just come to Kevin before we do. Because your thought there about giving control to the user and the consumer, and the much broader benefit that would bring, that's a kind of cultural challenge, isn't it, to a lot of client companies who want to keep as much control as possible over their own data, and use the data in the way in which they want to do so, rather than have to necessarily get.
If it's an organisation whose focus is on building product, then they're a bit closer to that than an organisation whose focus is on like driving people somewhere.
Right.
And I think actually as well, like the idea that people have control means that they pull the product towards them, right? If it's the right one, which is a lot less problematic than like trying to put someone down a funnel. But like some companies, and like I've been surprised sometimes because I've kind of like watched this area a bit, but even some very big corporates like see this area as very closely linked to CSR, because people are increasingly like understand issues around data, and so maybe it's just on the surface, but at least being seen to be like experimenting with ways of giving control away. That's like kudos for them looking modern and ethical.
Yeah, you're right. Right. Yeah, good. Okay, so let's have a question from you guys. So, anybody got a question here? Got one over there, just behind you, Andrew.
Hi. So I kind of have a feeling that the attribution allows you to indeed attribute media consumption to a particular person that converts. But then, how can attribution tell me what moves the needle? So what actually convinces such person to convert, and not that we invest 10 in a person that would only need 2 to convert?
So how can we use attribution? So just to take your question there. So how can we use attribution to really understand what's pushing the needle rather than just individual? Yeah. Yes. Okay. So I guess like speaking to the macro kind of level of what media is doing what at what point.
Because I feel that in a way attribution could lead to a distortion, that you invest more in a super searcher.
Yeah.
And the waste that you eliminate on one side ends up on another side. Yeah. So on the person that actually converts. Okay.
Anyone want to take that?
Sure. I mean, I think that's absolutely right. Basically, I think that it is skewed. I mean, in searching for the bigger motivations, we hope that by doing enough analysis of a big enough data set, then a particular thing will pop out and say, aha, this is the magic potion that works for everyone, and we'll do more of this. But there's no real way to protect your data set against someone that searches more than average or anything like that. It's kind of the squeaky wheel gets greased. If this is your universe, this is your data set, then you will come up with solutions that optimize on that data set. And so What was it? There was something that I read recently. It was kind of like the, if you have a car crash on a motorway and everyone stops to look, the internet would interpret that as you like car crashes, and will try and deliver more car crashes to you because you're paying attention to it. And it's the same kind of thing. It's that intersection with behaviour, I suppose.
If I can just build on that question, actually, because there are some agencies, some newish agencies who are talking a good game about artificial intelligence and its role in being able to connect in with econometrics and things like that to work back from, a client wants to sell 10,000 widgets in January, therefore this is the media mix that you need in order to achieve that, and then programmatically buying that media mix. That's what they're saying that they can potentially do. But it feels like that's a really problematic thing from all the issues that we've talked about here. So do you think we'll ever get to that point where genuinely we can do that?
I think there's a huge amount that can be done, and I think that we can start to answer some of those questions actually with the right analytic framework in place.
Yeah.
So if you have good measurement across all of your media spend, you can build some pretty good optimizers that will enable you to address some pretty top-line questions around, my budget's 20 million, how do I optimize that across my portfolio?
Right.
So I think that's done. I think that what machine learning will do is just give the opportunity to go much further and to move much faster. So when we're talking about, as we are today, the best approach on attribution, there are some ways of evaluating how good your attribution model is. With some of the approaches, you can calculate a probability that someone will or won't convert. Now, if you can do that, you can do it across the different techniques that you have, and your objective is to maximize the true positives and minimize all the false responses.
Yeah.
But actually, you could automate a lot of that process, and that's where some of the machine learning comes in. So the machine learning, with the right setup and a lot of investment, could look at obtaining data, building a series of models, evaluating them on a set criteria, and then looking at how you could improve those as well. So again, it's not a magic thing that suddenly it's going to solve all of the challenges, but yes, it's definitely going to allow us to do a lot more just by being faster. And yeah, it will provide a lot more opportunity, particularly on the activation side.
Okay.
It's worth kind of in terminology. We all love machine learning and AI. It's all statistics. We've dressed it up, but
Automation.
I was deep in linear algebra today for a machine learning problem. It is just bloody statistics. So. Once we recognise that, we can maybe bring some sanity back to all the discussions as well.
I'm pretty sure we won't be able to use machine learning to change what the objective is. Right. I think I don't really know much about statistics, as we prefer to call it, but I
can help you fix that.
But the idea, right, is that you know what the objective is, and you supply a lot of data, and the machine works out what levers to pull in order to try to achieve that objective for you. Well, the thing that it won't do is change its mind about what your business is trying to do, or read the situation in the market and suddenly realise that in fact we don't care about revenue anymore. Hopefully the machine won't do that.
Right.
So I just thought I'd point that out.
Yeah, good. Okay, let's take another question.
Hello, yes, I have two questions. The first one is it fair to say that attribution is more like a correlation act rather than a causation act? Because obviously when someone is on a site, is it converting because of something else than just by clicking on a link and landing to a page? That's the first question. Second one is, we know that lots of people use a sample of non-converters, and you suggesting that we should be looking at everything. With the amount of data we have about non-converters, is it fair to kind of use it that way?
I feel that was slightly pointed at me. The first one, yes, it's all correlation, but then that's okay if you can come up with a causal theory why. If you sit down and you say, I believe that if I go on this site with this advert, I will get a result, and then you test it and you do, then you can add that to your evidence. That's how science progresses. There's no problem with that. As if you come up with a result and you've got no idea why, and you just say, yes, all right, we'll do more of this, then that's a problem. The second one, the non-converters, it kind of depends what your decision-making process off the back of it is. Not all attribution requires all the non-converters. If your process is reliant on proving that something works much better than something else because this is what your converters say, then you should at least have a look to see what's happening in the non-converters. Sometimes you can get away with a sample, sometimes you can't, but storage is cheap, processing is getting cheaper. I think it's one for the future.
Can I just add one point to that? So just thinking about some of the different attribution frameworks, within some of them, you can get a read on the significance of each kind of touch point within your framework, but in many of them, you absolutely can't. So it's like building any model. It has to be overlaid with common sense and logic and reviewed, and you need to make sure that you're not stretching your data too far. So it is definitely that consultancy process on top as well.
Just a question actually to build on that. So a few of you talked about incompleteness, of course, been a lot of the problem here. As more media gets ad served, so as we start to get things like addressable TV and we have outdoor being ad served and all the rest of it. So in other words, as it becomes more digitized, are we actually naturally going to get over this problem of incompleteness, because we'll start to get to a point where far more of our media will be digital media?
I think that the biggest challenge is going to be connecting it to the sales data.
Right.
In many ways, it feels an easier challenge to start expanding the media channels where we have that individual level data. So for primarily online brands, that will potentially be a really good step forward. But for so many other categories where in-store sales are massively important, loads of the TV, outdoor advertising is going to be driving enormous footfall and sales in store. So unless we find that way to connect with all purchases, it's not going to help us go forward that much. That's going to hold us back. And there may be ways that we can start building onto that with a lot of the loyalty data from retailers, but I think it's going to remain fairly incomplete, to be honest.
And Kevin, I mean, you're flipping it to your idea of the kind of personal data side. I mean, if you're kind of opting into that kind of thing, because it means that you get better ads and better services, then do you think that actually has the potential to solve that problem?
Yeah, completely. Because if you're in control of the data that's being collected about yourself, there's no reason not to collect all of it. And when it's centered around one person, like there may be people that don't participate, let's say, but for anybody who does, then the picture of them is complete. The exchange, and it's quite right that there should be one, right? The value exchange is that whatever you plan to do with the data about a person that you access, it better deliver the value that they feel it means it's worth sharing, and you have to sustain that value, otherwise they'll stop. So it's just a different, it's a very different way of thinking about how personal data might be used. Today we're in the opposite place, and like I said when I began my presentation, I have in mind a leap, and I don't know how far away it is, but we can carry on trying to improve things with the work, most of what we've been talking about today. But I'm just imagining something that's very different.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, great. We've got a question in the corner over there. If we can take that one.
Just the conversation then about data being valuable. Do you think companies are doing enough to kind of instill in consumers how valuable their data actually is?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what sense of value do you think people actually have about their own data, and are companies doing enough?
I think it's, in a word, no. I think it's very rare that you see, Google is fairly unusual in kind of, that My Activity tracker having that. And certainly kind of when you go through to other sites, it's fairly rare to see that. And actually, I think that that transparency and that reveal will help kind of make that leap to sort of, their own personal data. So going to a site and actually when you get kind of the annoying remarketing ad, if you follow that through and then have a question, don't show me this ad, it's not suitable. But rather than just going to kind of the DSP or whatever, it actually goes through to the advertiser, then you start to have that data exchange kind of much more transparently. And so you'll sort of, you'll start to kind of build up that profile, and the sort of user will be far more aware of what's being tracked, why, and kind of actually what benefits that can bring. Because of course there are, whilst we love to ignore ads, whilst they can be annoying, actually there are significant amounts of benefits which you can gain by sharing that bit of data, and starting to put that at the forefront will start to sort of facilitate that change. And you look at the kind of changing laws in Europe, that will actually expedite it as well, I think, and start to make people far more aware. Actually, my favourite website, the one of 3 that I visit in a given week, suddenly looks like a sack of shit because it doesn't have all my favourite stuff on. Why is that? Oh, right, it's because I need to log in or I need to share this certain data. And so it will start to open up those channels and start to give people that greater awareness and probably actually make them volunteer quite a decent chunk, a lot more valuable chunk, to kind of build its points as well. Yeah.
So some of the most popular products that we all use every day rely on collecting vast amounts of really detailed personal data. Right? We're not stupid. Everybody who uses Facebook realizes that that's their business model because they haven't paid for it. Right? So people haven't forgotten that they didn't put their credit card in. The question's really important because people don't behave like they see the value in the data, and that's because of the inertia in moving away from the services that give us the things that we love to use every day. So yeah, I think that's why the question is there, because people don't act like they value it that much.
I mean, in my experience, I think there's an awful lot of people put too great a value on data, and it often happens. I worked at Postal Globe a few years ago, and you would talk to a mobile phone company about some of the location data, and they'd be like, "Oh, we want £2 million for this." It's like, well, it makes the business completely non-profitable for us, for the client. There simply isn't the benefit to be gained from the data. And at a personal level, how much should someone pay for your data to sell you a £3 toiletry item? Once you take out the various cuts and the costs and the VAT and all the rest of it, it's probably not worth more than, a tenth of a penny to pay you for the data to get an advert that's slightly more relevant to you.
The people that make the most money out of it are the ones who are selling it on, maybe.
Well, yeah, and it's because somewhere in the sort of ad stack that we believe it's worth that. Yeah. And we keep saying, yeah, we'll bring in more data into our solution and we'll make it bigger and better and we'll pay hundreds of thousands. How many ad tech companies are profitable? Just about none of them. The whole ad tech ecosystem, as soon as interest rates start to go back up and investors realize they can get more money from money in the bank than propping up a failing ad tech company in Shoreditch, then, we're going to see a massive clear out and maybe bring some sanity back to the costing structures. Sorry, rant.
Good stuff.
Fantastic. All right, let's take a final question. We've got one here.
Hi, it was a question around the self-selection in terms of what I want to see. Do you think that's going to push us into a little bit of a bubble around you're only exposed to what you want to see, and therefore the other things that actually might be useful for you and relevant for you, you kind of miss out on as a result? Like in London, we are living in a little bit of a bubble politically, maybe. Do you think those kind of things are going to happen then if we do the same to the ad industry?
Yeah, it's interesting. So the idea of a filter bubble and how we're, that's obviously with the fake news and so on, there's been a lot of talk about that. But might we actually get that if we are actually more in control of our data? We're only seeing more of the things that we have shown previously that we're interested in rather than things we don't know that we want. Good question.
I still think that advertising is, there's a lot of value to it. And the biggest bit of value is in telling somebody about a product which will make their life better that they didn't know existed. And it happened to me a few weeks ago. And I was telling Katherine earlier that on Facebook, one of these a video came up, and it was a tool that allows you to drill out screws that have had the screw heads stripped from them. You know, you stick it in your drill, and it sort of burrows slightly in, and then it allows you to unscrew it. It's brilliant. I bought one. You know, it's probably the first time in my life. Now, I can't actually remember whether I just went onto Amazon and looked for a similar product and bought the cheapest or best reviewed one, as opposed to clicking through the link. Sorry, Facebook. But you know, it was a product I didn't know existed that I wanted and that I'm convinced will make my life better. Should I remember to carry it with me?
Yeah, no. So still a role for advertising in things that we don't know that we want. So, Cass, do you think that's the case as well?
I think it is, and I think it will be interesting to see how effectiveness changes as that happens, as we're potentially advertising to a lot of people who are much more predisposed to it anyway.
Yeah.
Suddenly missing a lot of those people, as Andrew said, would have had the opportunity to hear something that they didn't know about that might be relevant for them. So, yeah, it'd be very interesting to look at that.
Yeah, great, okay.
You know, the filter, sorry, I'm going to jump in on this one as well. The filter bubble anxiety is that if we put, because of this effect, if we put adverts in front of people, we might get it wrong. Well, we're getting it wrong anyway, like 91%, what is it, 99% of the time, I can't do maths. But you know, we're getting it wrong anyway. It's much better to give people the tools to ask for the things that they want than to worry about guessing correctly that we offer it.
Yeah, cool. Great. Okay, I think we've got one more. Just one last question, if we may. So it's over here. Brilliant, thank you.
I suppose what sort of gains do you think there are to be had from attribution right now? So there's sort of you've got two conflicting positions in that perfect isn't necessarily the opposite of good. So there's some good, but at the same time we might be just polishing a turd. Like, what's the actual gains that you guys think are existing right now for attribution?
I mean, I would say that for a typical client who doesn't have a lot of measurement in place, it would be realistic to identify 20% improvements and realise maybe 10% of those the client might want to go halfway if you're just looking at digital attribution. If you're looking much wider at the fuller attribution question, I think that those gains could be much, much bigger. 30, 40% improvements in your overall effectiveness wouldn't be unusual at all. But yeah, it depends how granular.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I mean, it ultimately varies enormously by client, by vertical, by sub-vertical, by budget as well. So there's still a huge number of non-emotional purchases out there which are kind of averaging sort of 1.2 clicks to conversion. Attribution in that situation is not going to really make a big difference if 90% of your conversions coming off a single click where it's entirely price-led. Conversely, if you've got kind of a more emotional purchase, something which is based on kind of the appearance or the experience, people are doing loads of research, you've got millions of pounds of budget going into sort of 15 different channels, all of which can then be even further subdivided. Actually, there's going to be huge inefficiencies in that. You're going to fairly immediately, I'd hope, to see some savings. You'll be able to see some areas that are worth testing, see if you can kind of push that on. But it's not sort of, it's nowhere near one size fits all. It's kind of many to many in terms of those solutions.
On AdWords at Crowd, we've been testing recently the combination of data-driven attribution instead of last click and smart bidding, and seeing the kind of improvements, 20-30% shifts in conversion rate. So, I know what I said, but it does work. Some of the tools, but it's about testing stuff, right? You can't assume the results.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the biggest changes would actually be how agencies do it and do their decision-making processes bear any relation to the attribution. Is there any point in having, there's not that many mathsy people in advertising anyway. There's quite a lot in Google, but, and I've seen rooms full of history and arts graduates staying up till 9 o'clock at night in the office writing a presentation that no one will ever look at with some sort of attribution results in it that the client looks at doesn't know what it means, doesn't know it's not actionable. And you're making people's life miserable for absolutely no benefit whatsoever. So if you're going to do attribution, then at least have a point to it that say this is actively making your media better, and we can prove it.
That's great. Right. So on that note, we're out of time, unfortunately. But can we have a round of applause, please, for our brilliant speakers? Thank you. That was fantastic. So thank you to Google, of course, for hosting. Thanks, Adriana. And, of course, to Scriberia. So we'll be tackling the Scriberia visualization. And so, as we always say, Firestarters is a bit of an ongoing conversation. So any suggestions about subjects that you would like us to cover at Performance Firestarters in the future, then please do come to Adriana or to myself. But thank you very much for coming. Do stick around for drinks. We've got drinks in the room next door, so just follow the door through there. So please do stick around for drinks. Thank you.